I was 16 the night it happened, old enough to think I was independent, but still young enough to feel a little nervous when my parents left me home alone. They were driving 2 towns over to visit relatives for the weekend. I stayed behind because I had a mountain of homework, and honestly, I liked having the house to myself. No one telling me to turn down the TV, no one hovering over my shoulder while I ate junk food. Just peace, quiet, and freedom. The first night started out fine. I ordered some takeout, curled up on the couch with the dog, and watched movies until my eyes started to droop. By the time I finally shut everything off, it was close to midnight. I locked the front door, double-checked the back, then went upstairs to my room. The house had that strange silence it always got at night. Not empty exactly, but heavy, like every creak of the floorboards was somehow louder when no one else was around. I lay in bed, scrolling through my phone until sleep crept up on me. Everything was perfectly normal until I woke up. At first, I didn't know what had stirred me. The house was still dark, the only light a faint silver glow coming through the crack in my curtains. For a second, I thought maybe I just had a bad dream, but then I heard it. A sound so soft I almost convinced myself. I imagined it. Scratch, pause, scratch. It was faint, like fingernails dragging lightly across glass. I froze, listening. My room was on the 2nd floor. The only window in there was across from my bed, half covered by those thin curtains that never fully shut out the light at first. I thought it had to be the tree outside brushing against the glass. That old oak had branches that stretched pretty far, but the sound wasn't random. It wasn't the uneven sway of branches in the wind. It was steady, slow, almost deliberate. My heart started to beat harder. I pushed myself up on my elbows, staring at the dark outline of my window. That's when my dog lifted his head from the floor. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just stared at the window too, his ears pinned back, a low rumble starting in his chest. The scratching came again, louder this time. Drag, pause, drag. I held my breath, every nerve in my body screaming at me to move, but I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to get closer, to pull back the curtain, to look. Then a soft, deliberate tap, like someone or something had knocked on the glass. My throat tightened. There was no way. I was on the 2nd floor. Nobody could be standing outside that window unless they had a ladder, or unless they weren't human. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, but I didn't call anyone. I just slid under the covers and lay completely still, pretending to be asleep. My dog pressed himself against my side, still growling low in his throat, never taking his eyes off that window. The scratching went on for what felt like forever. Sometimes it stopped completely, and just when I started to think it was over, tap, 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 right against the glass. At some point, exhaustion won over fear, and I drifted in and out of a restless sleep. I had strange dreams that night, dreams of shadows moving outside the window, long fingers curling around the edges of the glass. Every time I jolted awake, I thought I saw something shift behind the curtains. Morning finally came. The sunlight streaming through the window should have felt comforting, but my stomach dropped the moment I looked. There, running diagonally across the outside of the glass, were long, thin streaks. Not random scratches, not dirt, not weather damage. Deliberate marks. 4 parallel lines over and over, as though someone had dragged their nails across the glass again and again. I bolted downstairs the second my parents came home later that day, dragging them up to show them. My dad shook his head, saying it was probably just the tree. My mom tried to calm me down, telling me I'd scared myself from watching too many horror movies, but the oak tree, its branches didn't reach anywhere near that window. That night, I insisted on keeping my curtains shut tight, but even now, years later, I still wake up some nights with the sound of it echoing in my head. That slow, deliberate scratching, and I can't help but wonder if When I hid under the blankets, pretending to sleep, something was standing just outside, watching. When I was 14, I thought of myself as pretty responsible. My parents both worked late shifts at the hospital, so it wasn't unusual for me to spend evenings alone. Most nights followed the same pattern. I'd get home from school, fix myself a snack, watch some TV, and then sit at the kitchen table with my books spread out. By the time my parents pulled into the driveway, I'd usually be halfway through a homework assignment and halfway asleep. It was normal. It was routine. I wasn't scared of being home alone, at least not until that one night. It was late autumn. It's one of those nights when the air feels heavier than usual and the whole house creaks with the wind. I was sitting at the kitchen table, hunched over my math homework, and I heard it. A sound from the basement. It was faint, just a single creak, like an old floorboard giving under pressure. I froze, pencil hovering above the page, my ears straining. The basement in our house was unfinished. Cold concrete floors, a washer and dryer, boxes stacked against the walls. The kind of place nobody wanted to linger. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Houses make noises. Pipes expand, wood shifts, furnaces click on. I forced myself back to my work, but a few minutes later, it came again. This time, louder, creak, then silence. My stomach nodded. I set my pencil down and just listened. And that's when I heard it. Not a creak this time. Not pipes, not wood. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the basement floor. I sat there, frozen in my chair, every hair on my body standing on end. It wasn't possible. Nobody was supposed to be down there. Nobody had gone down there. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse. My imagination ran wild. Someone standing perfectly still in the basement, listening, just like I was. Finally, with shaking hands, I picked up the phone and dialed my mom. She answered on the second ring, her voice tired but calm. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked as I told her what I'd heard. She didn't waste time arguing. She told me in a sharp whisper to grab the cordless phone, lock myself in her bedroom until she got home. I did exactly that. I crept up the stairs as quietly as I could, every step groaning beneath my feet. I kept glancing back at the basement door, terrified it would swing open. When I reached my parents' room, I shut the door, locked it, and crawled onto the bed, clutching the phone like a lifeline. The house was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. For a few minutes, nothing happened. I started to think maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I heard it, the basement door creaking open. I clamped my hand over my mouth, tears stinging my eyes. The sound of footsteps followed, heavy, deliberate. Moving up the basement stairs, step, step, step. They stopped at the top of the stairs. For a long time, there was nothing. No movement, just silence. And then the sound of breathing, not my own. Not through the phone, right outside the bedroom door. Slow, steady breathing, like someone was standing there, listening. I gripped the phone tighter, whispering into it. My mom's voice on the other end was shaky now, telling me to stay calm, that help was on the way. She must have called the police. I barely heard her. All I could focus on was that breathing. Minutes crawled by. It felt like hours. My throat was dry, my body frozen. Then a faint scrape, like fingernails brushing against the wood of the bedroom door. I almost passed out from fear. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Silence fell again. I stayed on the line, my mom whispering encouragement till flashing red and blue lights painted the walls outside my window. The moment I saw them, I bolted upright. The police swept through the house, their voices booming, their boots pounding the floors. Finally, one of them came to unlock the bedroom door and led me outside. I was shaking so badly, I could barely speak. They searched the basement. What they found made my stomach turn. One of the small basement windows had been pried open. Muddy footprints led from the window across the floor, stopping right at the base of the stairs. Whoever it was had broken in. They'd been in my house the whole time. But when the police arrived, the footprints led nowhere. The intruder was gone. 4 weeks after, I couldn't sleep. Every little creak, every sigh of the house made me relive that night. I kept imagining someone still down there, waiting, and sometimes, even now, when I walk past that basement door, I swear I hear something shift in the darkness below. I was 17 the night it happened, old enough to think I could handle being home alone, but not old enough to stop my imagination from running wild. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me in charge of the house. It wasn't the first time, and honestly, I liked having the place to myself. I had snacks stocked up, my favorite shows lined up, and no one telling me when to turn off the lights. That evening was normal. I stayed curled up on the couch with my phone, scrolling endlessly, half watching the TV for background noise. The hours slipped by without me noticing. At around 10 p.m., the house phone rang. We still had a landline back then, though hardly anyone used it. The only people who ever called were my grandma or telemarketers. I let it ring until the voicemail picked up, not even looking away from my screen. But then it rang again. I frowned. Same number showing up on the caller ID. Unknown. I almost ignored it a second time, but something about the persistence unsettled me. On the third ring, I picked it up. Hello? At first, there was nothing. Just dead air. I thought maybe it was one of those robocalls that glitch out. And then, faintly, a man's voice. Low, raspy, almost like a whisper. Don't hang up. A chill ran down my spine. My mouth went dry. I slammed the phone down without saying another word. My pulse was racing, but I tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was some creep pulling a prank. I checked the locks on the doors anyway, just to be safe. Then I sat back down on the couch, turning the volume up on the TV to push away the silence pressing against the house. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail, staring at the glowing red light as the machine clicked on. The recording played my mom's cheerful voice, the beep, and then his voice again. I can see you. The words cut through me like ice. I jumped to my feet, spinning toward the front window. The blinds were closed, but suddenly I felt exposed, like eyes were on me from every direction. My skin prickled. I grabbed the remote and shut the TV off. The silence was deafening. My own breathing sounded too loud. Then the phone rang again and again, over and over, the shrill tone filling the house. Each time, I let it go to voicemail. Each time, the same voice, taunting. I'm closer now. You shouldn't be alone. Pretty, how's you've got here? Every word made my chest tighten until it hurt. I turned off every light in the house and crouched down behind the couch, clutching my cell phone in my hands. I thought about calling my parents, but I didn't want to scare them while they were hours away. Instead, I called a friend. I whispered into the phone, telling her what was happening. She tried to calm me down, said it was probably a prank, some neighbor kid messing with me, but I could hear the unease in her voice too. While I was on the call, the house phone rang again. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My friend fell silent as we both listened. The voicemail picked up. This time, the man's voice was louder, closer. I'm already inside. My blood went cold. I ended the call with my friend and dialed 911 on my cell. My voice shook so badly, the dispatcher had to ask me to repeat myself 3 times. I whispered every detail I could. The calls, the voice, the threats. She told me to stay hidden, that officers were on their way. Every second dragged on like an hour. The house phone rang again and again, each voicemail more disturbing than the last. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps upstairs. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. Finally, after what felt like forever, Red and blue lights flashed outside the window. Relief flooded me so hard I almost collapsed. The police stormed inside, searching every room. When they told me the house was empty, I didn't believe them at first, but then they checked the phone. The calls weren't coming from outside. They weren't from some random number or from across the street, court, even the neighbor's house. Every single call had been made from inside, from my house phone. That night, left with the police and stayed at her neighbor's until my parents got home. The officers never figured out who it was. No forced entry, no signs of anyone else being inside. Just dozens of voicemails from a voice I can still hear in my nightmares. And the worst part? That phone line was in the kitchen, just a few feet from where I had been hiding. It was a rainy Friday night when 16-year-old Emily found herself home alone for the weekend. Her parents had gone on a short trip out of town, leaving her in charge of the house. Emily didn't mind. She actually liked the quiet. Their neighborhood was safe, the house was familiar, and she had plans to binge watch a few movies with popcorn. The steady sound of rain tapping against the windows felt almost comforting by around 9 p.m. Emily had curled up on the couch with a blanket, her phone beside her. The storm outside had picked up, and the occasional rumble of thunder rolled through the sky. It wasn't unusual, but the storm gave the night a slightly eerie feeling. Halfway through her movie, she heard the faint sound of footsteps upstairs. Emily froze, muting the TV. She sat perfectly still, listening. The only sound was the rain and her own heartbeat thudding in her chest. Maybe it was the house settling, she told herself. Old houses creak, especially during storms. But then, there it was again, a slow, deliberate step across the upstairs hallway. Emily's eyes flicked toward the staircase. She lived in a 2-story house, and from the couch, she had a clear view of the dark stairwell. Every instinct in her body screamed at her that she wasn't alone. She grabbed her phone and texted her mom, "Hey, think I heard something upstairs." Probably nothing. She added a smiley face at the end to make it seem casual. Though her hands were trembling as she typed, no reply. Her parents were probably out of signal range. Emily tried to focus back on the movie, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was moving upstairs. Minutes ticked by, every second stretching longer than the last. Finally, she convinced herself it was nothing and got up to make more popcorn. She was in the kitchen when she heard it again, only this time. It wasn't footsteps. It was the sound of a door upstairs slowly creaking shut. Her blood ran cold. Emily stood frozen, popcorn bag in hand, her ears straining. The house was silent again, except for the storm. She set the bag down, grabbed the biggest kitchen knife she could find, and slowly backed into the living room. She dialed her best friend, Hannah. "Hey," Emily whispered when Hannah answered. "I think there's someone in my house." Hannah laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Yeah, right." "What?" The storm ghost came to hang out. "I'm serious," Emily hissed. "I heard footsteps upstairs. And now a door just closed." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Hannah's voice grew serious. "Emily, call the police. I'm coming over." Emily hung up and considered dialing 911. But something inside her told her to check first, just to make sure. She didn't want to look foolish if it really was nothing. She crept toward the staircase, gripping the knife so tightly her knuckles turned white. Every step she took up the stairs felt like it echoed through the house. At the top, the hallway stretched before her, dimly lit by the nightlight plugged into the wall. Her parents' bedroom door was wide open, just as it had been. Her room was open too, but at the end of the hall, the guest room door was closed. Emily knew she hadn't closed it. Her breath quickened. She reached out with her free hand and turned the knob. The door creaked open slowly, revealing nothing but shadows. She flicked on the light. The room was empty. Emily let out a shaky laugh, relief flooding through her. Maybe she was just scaring herself. She turned to leave and froze from behind her. Deep inside the guest room closet came the sound of breathing, slow, heavy, in and out. Emily's stomach dropped. She didn't move, didn't even blink, terrified that if she did, whoever was in there would burst out. The sound continued, steady, unmistakable. She backed out of the room, heart hammering, and ran down the stairs. She locked herself in the bathroom, knife still in hand, and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The operator calmly assured her that officers were on the way and told her to stay put. Emily crouched in the bathtub, every muscle in her body trembling. The minutes crawled by like hours. Then she heard it again, the sound of footsteps moving down the hallway above her. She clamped her hand over her mouth, trying not to make a sound. The footsteps grew louder, pacing back and forth. At one point, they stopped directly above the bathroom. Emily could almost picture someone standing there, listening. Finally, the wail of sirens pierced the night. The footsteps stopped. Emily stayed in the bathroom until she heard pounding on the front door and officers calling her name. She ran out, tears streaming down her face, and told them everything. The police searched the house thoroughly. Upstairs, in the guest room closet, they found it, a small bag with food wrappers, a water bottle, and a phone charger. Someone had been living there, but the intruder was gone. The window in the guest room was open, rain blowing in through the curtains. He had escaped into the storm just moments before the police arrived. Emily never spent another night alone in that house again. 17-year-old Jason wasn't the type to get scared easily. He was tall, athletic, and had this stubborn confidence that nothing bad would ever really happen to him. So when his parents left for a weekend trip, he shrugged it off as no big deal. He'd have the house to himself, order pizza, play video games until sunrise, and enjoy the kind of freedom only a teenager home alone can truly appreciate. It was a quiet Saturday night. The neighborhood was calm, the streets outside mostly empty. Jason had settled into the living room with his headset on, controller in hand, completely absorbed in a multiplayer game with his friends. His laughter filled the room as he trash-talked them through the mic. But in the middle of one match, he heard something that didn't fit the rhythm of his night, a feint. Jason pulled his headset down around his neck and glanced toward the back of the house. His dog Max was asleep on the rug, undisturbed. Jason frowned. Maybe something fell in the kitchen. He got up and checked. The counters were clean, nothing out of place. The doors were locked. Shrugging, he went back to his game. Minutes later, another sound came. This time, it wasn't a thud. It was the soft creak of a door hinge. Jason muted his mic, straining to listen. His heart rate picked up slightly, but he forced a smirk. Old houses make noise, he muttered to himself. Relax. Still, curiosity tugged at him. He grabbed a flashlight and made his way toward the hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight. He checked each door, bathroom, laundry, storage all empty. Everything was exactly as it should be, but as he turned to head back, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The door to the basement was slightly open. Jason froze. He knew he hadn't been down there, and his parents always kept it shut. The dark crack of the basement doorway seemed to breathe shadows. He swallowed hard and, against his better judgment, pulled the door shut with a sharp click. Then he locked it, telling himself it was just a draft from the storm outside. He tried to shake it off, ordering pizza and returning to his game. By the time the delivery guy arrived, Jason had nearly forgotten about the basement. He ate, joked with his friends online, and let the hours pass. Midnight came and went. Then Max, the dog, lifted his head and growled. Jason's laughter died instantly. Max never growled unless there was a reason. His ears were perked, his body tense, his gaze locked on the hallway. Jason muted his headset again, whispering, "What is it, boy?" The growl deepened. Max took a few steps toward the hallway, his nails clicking against the wood floor. Then Jason heard it too, the faint, deliberate sound of footsteps coming from below, from the basement. Jason's blood ran cold. He grabbed his phone and backed toward the front door. His first instinct was to run outside and call for help, but something inside him, curiosity, pride, maybe stupidity, kept him rooted in place. He dialed his friend Mark instead. "Yo," Mark answered groggily. "Dude, it's past 1. Why are you calling me?" "Someone's in my house," Jason whispered. His voice was trembling now, something his friends had never heard before. There was silence. Then Mark said, "Call the cops. Right now." Jason nodded, but before he could hang up, the sound from the basement grew louder. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to be quiet anymore. He could hear slow, heavy footsteps climbing the stairs. The basement door handle rattled. Jason's heart slammed against his chest. He dropped the phone, grabbed a kitchen knife, and pulled Max close to him. The door handle twisted violently, shaking, but the lock held. Then, silence. Jason waited, every second stretching painfully long. His palms were slick with sweat, the knife slippery in his grip. Max barked furiously at the door, but whoever was there never opened it. Finally, Jason dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The dispatcher assured him officers were on their way, told him to stay calm and stay on the line. Jason's voice cracked as he whispered that someone was trying to break in. Minutes crawled by like hours. The dispatcher's voice was a faint comfort in his ear, but Jason couldn't focus on anything except the silence that hung over the house. Then, just when he thought maybe the intruder had given up, a loud bang echoed through the basement. It sounded like something heavy had been thrown against the wall. Max barked uncontrollably, his teeth bared. Jason backed toward the front door, ready to bolt, and then the footsteps started again. But this time, instead of coming up the stairs, they moved around beneath him, pacing back and forth in the basement like a caged animal. The sirens finally pierced the night. Jason almost cried with relief. He unlocked the front door, bolting outside with Max at his heels. The police rushed in, flashlights cutting through the shadows. They searched the house top to bottom, then descended into the basement. Jason stood, shivering on the front lawn, his stomach twisted in knots, waiting for them to return. When they did, their faces were grim. "Kid," one of the officers said, "you weren't imagining it. Someone's been staying down there." They'd found a pile of blankets in the corner, along with food wrappers, a flashlight, and even a small journal. Whoever it was had been living in Jason's basement for at least a few days, but there was something worse near the makeshift bed, carved into the wooden support beam, words scratched deep into the wood. "I like watching you." The intruder had escaped before the police arrived. To this day, they never caught him. Jason never stayed home alone again, and no matter how much time passed, he could never shake the feeling that the man who once lived beneath his feet might still be out there, waiting for another chance.